The grand essentials of happiness are something to do, something to love, and something to hope for. Helen K. Chalmers. Unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates. My life of dreams. Here is the story of a dreamer. Some live dreaming, others dream of living. At the end there remains no substance, and the closest one can come up with is that it never was. Is this all there is to it? When you think about it, you might also ponder that all our lives, whether lived happily or not, seem more and more like it. The form at the seashore only lasts for a short while, disappearing soon after. Also consider for a brief moment the beauty of a candle flame, which delicately flickers and dances to its own rhythm. While you eagerly watch, the candle melts and struggles one last time before leaving you in the dark. The flame and candle are gone, and your curiosity is awakened, asking where the candle went. Now consider our lives: born, lived, struggled, learned, danced, and sang a song, and done everything one could dream about, hopefully to our heart's content. Now grown frail and old, youth is gone, dynamism is no more, hopes, expectations, and dreaming continue for a while longer, and then suddenly all is over. Is this how we are meant to live? Here now, and gone forever. All our thoughts, emotions, dreams, and hopes, everything is gone. Is there any hope, a spark of light, or any indication that there is something beyond? Could life really be just oblivion and nothing more? Every time you open a book, it begins anew. However, when closed, it is almost as if it has never been opened. Do you remember everything? When memories are no more, what is left, and where did it all go? Our lives are like the ocean waves, affected by the ebb and flow, by the changing winds, by the warmth of the sun, and the phases of the moon. We too move to and fro, as we start, with little ripples, and become great and fierce waves, just to end by the shore. Then to go back and start all over again. The cycle repeats itself, while we sing a song we seem not to know anything of. By the time we learn all about it, it may be a little too late. Someone else may continue to sing, and the whole world is once again filled with the music of joy or sadness. Are we altogether gone? Where are we placed within this equation? The drama written ages ago popularly repeats itself into now, as with all our pasts and dreams of tomorrow. We call this life. My name is Suren, and even when I was very young, I felt that this name had been given to me for a specific reason. It could have been a password for opening certain doors. I cannot be sure. Again, as a child, I felt that it was my name even before my birth. In fact, I believed it was not because my mother was recommended by others to do so. As I understand, she chose it, yet it might have been the identity of somebody she knew in the past. However, I knew my father had no interest whatsoever in naming me. When I was able to formulate words, whilst still very young, I questioned her, but she could not enlighten me. Later, as an adult, I discovered a number of interesting things about my name. It was originally Sanskrit, where it meant Lord over the heavenly bodies. It was Armenian, where it meant born of the sword. It was Nordic, it was Indian, but it was not common. Maybe, just maybe, I started dreaming as soon as I was born. It may therefore be an excellent idea to tell you first about what I have become and where I am today. What you are beginning to read and discover is all about what I remember, and everything I have written about is factual. You might find it interesting, or prefer to discard it altogether. You might even choose to call me a dreamer, as many have done before. It is of no consequence or tragedy. If it is of some benefit to you, I will be immensely happy. If not, I will not be offended. Some of the things I have spoken or written about may sound like science fantasy, but what I remembered and are presenting here are my own memories of the past, under no influence from other sources, and certainly not based on false memories, as some may prefer to think. They contain my own joys, fears, dreams, discoveries, and ideals. However, you will also find me quoting from other great thinkers, where appropriate, in support of my thoughts. I have made sure to present these memories as I know them to be. Therefore, I hope they are going to be as exciting and interesting for you to read as they were to me whilst relaying them. I am a scientist, researcher, psychologist, philosopher, and an artist. But I am also an everlasting dreamer. I always hope that good things will happen to people. Ever since my days as a toddler, I was able to feel every expression of existence surrounding me, every sound I heard, every song I listened to, every face I recognized from some time ago. One might say that everything I have experienced was part of my forever dreaming. However, the only reality was still me, and this me was somewhere, somewhat hidden behind a mask I was using as a vehicle, which was to become a major part of existence, expressing my person like the one known to the world. Frankly, I had no choice but keep playing a role, perhaps just as it is with every other human being, and even as it was planned. But was there a plan? Why was I here? Nobody, it seemed, was able to tell me about anything. I simply was. You might still think of what I relay here as if being based upon a false memory after being subjected to a fantasy story when I was very young. Could it be possible to be inflicted with that kind of adult memory when one is about 2 years of age? My mother used to worry about my mental state until she learned that I was a very imaginative youngster. Surely I was as normal as any other child of my age, needing to learn to formulate my words and speak of my memories after a certain sophistication in learning. Some friends of my mother apparently spoke about kinds of spirit possessions, making the toddler speak of adult stories. How would they know? This would have worried her immensely. Here is what I remember ever since my entry into this world. It seemed that I was first guided to enter a huge tubular structure filled with green, fluidic material, which felt familiar to me, as if it had happened many times before. During this unique process of entry into a different existence, I became unconscious for a short period of time. I then began to experience a chaotic dream with no meaning. I was simply there. My memory of being led into a mechanical city of huge proportions with cylindrical structures one could only describe as buildings, with windows and beautiful incandescent lights streaming from them was surreal. I was fascinated with that huge tubular-shaped architecture. Yea, perhaps some equipment of majestic proportions, where others were also guided into. I was not alone. I was informed that my other relative from the same grouping was to follow me a little later. The place was teeming with activity. Obviously, many others were making their way into an adventure of fantasy dreams, like me. They were to consider it as their actual physical lives in an alien world for a period of time. There needed to be some realism in this, so as to experience things as realistically as possible. It seemed I knew where I was going and what to expect on arrival. However, it was not quite clear if we were to return back, or even if it was part of this adventure. As a result, my memory of being born into an unusual world was completely intact. I remembered every struggle, every muffled sound of my mother, Shainik, if this was her real name, as she was addressed in different languages, as well as sounds other humans made, whilst I was still in the womb. I remember others calling her by different sounding names like Shania, Shorna, or Shahende before and after my birth. I was entertained with rhythmic beats of my mother's heart before my emergence, and was aware of every fluid rushing through all around me. After all this time, I still remember every detail of my new environ, the smiling faces of nurses, the doctors, and midwives after I popped out. I recall every detail of activities they were engaged in, even the expressions on the faces of people. There were those who assisted me as a newborn, like other newborns, and others helping the mothers, including mine. I felt it to be an interesting but also fascinating dream. I remember my mother's face, her smiles, and her scent so clearly, so different, but not unpleasant, to what I could recall from aforetimes. Since a newborn is not able to distinguish the faces of people under normal circumstances, it was an unusual state of consciousness. It felt as if I was outside observing everything. My father was called Katsaros, which sounds Greek, perhaps even related to Katsars in olden Liechtenstein, but he was to remain a mystery for a very long time. I was to meet him later, as I discovered he was not permitted to enter the room where I was born. In fact, I was to learn much later that men were not allowed to be present when their wives gave birth. It was certainly going to be an interesting adventure. After my birth, according to my aunt and mother, as they informed me much later, they threw the umbilical cord to the roof, where a big bird, probably an eagle, took it and flew into far distances. According to myth, it was believed that whenever this kind of thing happened, the newborn would travel abroad when it became an adult. Admittedly, I did. They wrapped my tiny body in tight clothing and tied my legs together so that I could not move an inch in any direction. Would they ever release me from this awful situation? I wondered. A little later they did, but for a short while. But in the meantime, my mother was instructed to continue with this practice. At that time I could not understand the verbal expressions used, as they were unfamiliar to me. I was yet to learn about them, but for now I was only able to comprehend the meaning of emotions in a limited fashion. This fascinated me a lot, for whatever was expressed as speech and its tonal quality was enough to understand their meaning. I was content. On the other hand, often being tied, as I was to experience for a while yet, did not look promising. It was ugly. Later I learned that it was for my well-being, as they did not want me to grow either crooked or have bowed legs. They almost always laid me on my back, and I gasped for air. I desperately wanted them to know how uncomfortable I felt, but could not move any limb or finger. It felt as if I was imprisoned completely against my will.